Hello there. The vulnerable need to be protected from the state machine. So we now live in a country where our state health professionals are telling vulnerable children with learning difficulties that should they fall seriously ill, they will not be resuscitated. Yes, according to press reports, UK physicians have been telling vulnerable children that they'll not be resuscitated should the worst happen to them, and some families are unaware of this. And as a result, a do not attempt cardiopulmonary resuscitation, a DNA CPR note is placed in their records. It's also sometimes referred to as a do not resuscitate, DNR, or do not attempt resuscitation, DNAR. Now these are generally seen as a good thing when used properly, but these reports throw doubt on how they're being used. And my question now is, how many vulnerable children and vulnerable adults have had these attached to their medical records without their families knowing during the pandemic when doctors were worried about being overwhelmed? And get this, unless specifically marked for review, those DNRs can be an indefinite notice in their records. They stay there forever unless actively rescinded. Now the important thing here is that these notices only refer to cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR. The NHS says that patients with DNR notices will still get all the other appropriate care and treatment they need. Now, DNR notices should be made on a case-by-case basis, and the decision can be made by a physician for the patient, even without telling them if it would cause them physical or psychological harm. Here's the sort of thing the NHS guidance says. You should be given the chance to understand what a DNA CPR is, how the decision is made, and why they think CPR would not be suitable for you. You should then be consulted, and doctors should ask about your wishes and preferences. Your doctor makes the final decision. Doctors do not have to give you treatment if they think it will not work. So as far as I can tell, these vulnerable children are told this is what's going to happen to them, whether they understand it or not. So from the stories in the Telegraph and Mail, it looks to me like the vulnerable children were sat down and this predetermined process, where the decision had already been taken by the doctor, was gone through, without their family present. Now I don't know if those particular children had other underlying health issues that would make CPR pointless. But if these patients are vulnerable, why weren't the families brought into the consultation? And bear in mind, according to the NHS guidance, learning disability, autism, or dementia are not reasons to put a DNA CPR on someone's record. So if that was the only reason vulnerable children were told, yes, told that a DNR notice would be put in their record, they are surely unlawful DNRs. And using it during a pandemic in this manner, if the reports are true, points to a system ready to sacrifice healthy people because they have mental shortcomings. As the Telegraph reports, the revelation will fuel fears that patients with learning disabilities were discriminated against during the pandemic and raise concerns that some orders could have been applied without families knowing. And with the Mail reporting that, research last year also found that do not resuscitate orders were being placed illegally on the medical files of adults with learning disabilities, you can understand the worries people have. But what should worry people more is why are non-medically qualified patients and relatives, if present, being asked to make a clinical judgment on the suitability of a DNR notice, given the NHS guidance that I've seen, that it is a doctor's decision to make. The press reports make it sound that it's being treated more like a lifestyle choice for a child who doesn't know the ramifications of the answers they give to such a question. If so, who's signing it off? This should worry us all. And does this mean children with Asperger's and higher functioning autistics, who also fall into the category of having learning disabilities, will be left to die too? That would remove some of the greatest minds from the gene pool, or perhaps that's the plan. And as for children with Down syndrome, you will never find a more loving child than them, and we need as much love in this world as we can get. So the thought of a doctor sitting down and telling a child with Down syndrome or autism that they won't be resuscitated makes me seethe. So as I said at the start, the vulnerable in society must be protected from the state machine. The use of DNRs and the administrative machinery behind them must be reviewed with some urgency. And I would argue that a new law must be passed to ensure all DNRs are reviewed regularly, and that any DNR made out before that new rule is put in place becomes immediately null and void. A new one would then be required. This surely is the only way to ensure that all DNR notices are up to date and fully relevant given the patient's current condition, and also to give us all confidence that they were put in place for patient needs, and not simply to prevent the NHS being overstretched. Well, Boris Johnson is faring well in the polls at the moment, isn't he? Not. But before I start on the Prime Minister, I just want to say a massive thank you to all my Super Thanks, Patreon and PayPal supporters, as well as those that do buy a mug with my mug on it. Links in the descriptions box below. You really do help me keep this channel going. It appears that the Prime Minister Boris Johnson is on a very steep and slippery slope in the polls, with pollsters saying that, based on these results, the Tories would lose over 100 seats. Some polls put the difference between the Tories and Labour at as high as 8 points. And this latest poll of 10,000 respondents, conducted by 38 Degrees, Survation and Professor Christopher Hanretty of Royal Holloway, puts Labour 6 points ahead on 41%, with the Tories on 35%. And it seems that it's down to secret partying and under-the-table lobbying. And the result of that would be a 111-seat loss for the Tories at the next general election, with the Prime Minister himself being a casualty, as he would lose his seat of Uxbridge and North Ruislip. According to the poll, the older generation would be making the change, as they believe that their politicians should abide by the Nolan principles that dictate how people should act in high office, by adhering to the principles of integrity, accountability, honesty, leadership, openness, objectivity, and selflessness. So these poll respondents obviously don't think the Tories have been abiding by those principles. Now, according to the results, many seats that Labour lost in 2019 would once again turn red. So any Lib Dem supporters hopeful that they would be the beneficiaries of a Tory slide might be very disappointed, because the two-party state almost always reverts to red or blue at a general election, with 2010 being an outlier. But poll results like these also have the Tory leadership hopefuls coming out to gauge the wind, thinking maybe now is their time. But where party leaderships are concerned, it's about the party membership, not the country as a whole. So here it's going to be, how faithfully is a potentially party leader seen to be backing the party belief system? And right now, the one senior Tory politician that the party members see doing the job their way is Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, and new post-Brexit negotiator. And she has supplanted the old favourite, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak. Mainly, it's being reported because of his current tendency to raise taxes and spend big. Not something high up in Tory supporters' wish lists. This appears to have gone down badly with Conservative members who favoured Mr Sunak to move from number 11 to number 10 in a Conservative home poll in August, says the Mail. When the same question was asked of readers today, mistrust has surged past him. But as the Mail points out, Rishi Sunak is popular with the wider public, as a recent Redfield and Wilton Strategist poll indicated. Sunak would also be the preferred choice of 19% of party supporters as opposed to party members, where Truss only gets 9% per support. But it is the members that choose the new leader, not supporters. So at present it is Truss that looks favourite should Boris continue his rather helter-skelter-like slide down the poll rankings. So what's your opinion on DNR notices? Are you angry yet? Please like and comment below. Please subscribe and like this video, buy a mug and support me on Patreon or PayPal, and thank you for watching.